The White House is on a top secret mission to save President Biden's reelection chances. Axios reports today that it is called essentially Operation Don't Let Him Trip. Democrats are reportedly very concerned that the president could take a bad fall before the November election and that would set off a difficult conversation as we head into election season, and perhaps it could be very embarrassing. So the president's team is taking active measures to ensure that it doesn't happen. Quote, with a physical therapist, Biden's been doing exercises to improve his balance. He has been wearing tennis shoes more often to avoid slipping and using the short stairs on Air Force One. And it looks like this plan is already in motion. President Biden using those small steps today, going down Air Force One, and it looked like he had to catch himself at that moment that you just saw. That is the don't trip strategy in motion here. It's a far cry from what the media and Democrats have been publicly saying about the president's health. Watch this.
It is hard for us to keep up with this president who is constantly working every day to get things done.
Joe Biden is agile, is capable.
Incredibly sharp, incredibly probing, incredible command.
He's doing more than showing up for work and functioning. He's doing the job that we put him in there for.
As he says every day, watch me. And he puts many of us to shame with his energy.
You know what his age and wisdom has been able to do? It's been able to move transformative pieces of legislation.
He's younger than I am, so he's a kid to me as well.
So, Janine, I mean, if you work for the president, I don't know what else you're supposed to do. They're trying to make sure that he doesn't have that fall that is discussed. Yeah. That could be, I mean, you hold your breath when you watch him go down the stairs.
Yeah, we all hold our breath. And I counted the number of stumbles and falls in the last couple of years. There were 11 of them. And that's with an advanced team. That's with people, making those shorter steps and putting him in a position where, he's not going to have a problem. Look, 77% of Americans think that Joe Biden is too old to be effective for 4 more years. And yet the team around him is saying, they're lying. Martha, it's true. They're lying. They're saying, like Swalwell, he puts us to shame with his energy. No, he doesn't. He doesn't show up before 10. He's got to have rehab for a few hours. He's got vacations at the beach. He doesn't come out until 10 o'clock. He goes on ice cream runs. He takes a nap. He doesn't go out to dinners when he's in foreign countries. I mean, he doesn't even have time for the job. And you got to wonder, why does he want this job so badly when he's humiliated like that? What do you think other world leaders think of this man? And, at some point you have to say, maybe it's time for me to exit the stage. I'm embarrassing myself. But forget all that. Let's assume that he does enough PT and he doesn't have any more stumbles. All he has to do is open his mouth. It's still over then.
Greg.
You hold your breath around Joe Biden. I hold my breath around Eric Swalwell. Isn't it weird, though? Isn't it funny how Joe and his polls are in perfect symmetry? They're both falling, figuratively and literally. They're perfectly parallel. And talk about a low bar that they're setting for him. It's not like, let's get Joe to tackle the issues. Let's prep him to take on Trump. Maybe create a system or a plan to fight crime or deal with immigration or the economy. No, it's make sure he doesn't fall flat on his face. And he's not even drinking, which is, that could explain it. Everything about maintaining the facade, the Joe Biden facade, and it is one, begins with the word don't. Don't let him speak too long. Don't let him walk or ride a bike. Don't let him wander off. Don't let him eat gassy foods. Don't let him sniff children's hair or passionately kiss visitors' teenage daughters. But they can't expect him to do anything. It's all don't. I mean, he really is like a caged bird, and he's not running the country. We are aware of that, and he doesn't mind this role because he was born to be a figurehead. He was born to be a hood ornament. Just wear the bomber jacket and the aviator sunglasses and make sure I get a hot meal.
So, Jessica, it always makes me wonder when I see these stories, who's leaking this? And is there a movement to try to nudge him in the direction of saying, I'm gonna step aside?
There's a very public movement that's happening. Obviously, Congressman Dean Phillips ended up being the face of it, but you do see it in the numbers about whether people want him to run again and whether they think that he's up to the job. And the Democratic numbers are lower than the Republican numbers on that, but they still exist. Right. And it's a conversation. I think the White House is taking it on more than they were before, which I think is important. And you can see a shift in the way President Biden is talking about the age issue. Talking about, like, judge me on my accomplishments. I know that I'm old. It used to be that he wouldn't even kind of acknowledge that. But I gotta say, so part of the core of the Axios piece was about the sneakers, that he'd switched to sneakers. And then our very own Peter Doocy is on Fox and Friends this morning wearing the same sneakers that Joe Biden wore. And he said everyone on Capitol Hill from age 36 to 80 is wearing these sneakers.
We worry about Peter Doocy falling down, too.
Well, but Peter Doocy also, when they were on their latest overseas trip, was talking about Biden's schedule. Remember when Biden said, I'm going to go take a nap or it's late? And Peter said that he was working to the wee hours of the night. He said he's held a complete schedule. And our perception around the world, by the way, is up since Biden came into the presidency.
Based on what?
Based on what other world leaders and people in other countries think of America. But you said, okay, you don't need to watch him. Let's just hear what comes out of his mouth. And I put together some of Trump's latest cognitive beauties from the last 10 days. He said you need an ID to buy bread. Has anyone shown ID to get Wonder Bread lately? He said that he ran against Obama in 2016. He ran against Hillary Clinton. He warned that Biden will get us into World War II, which I'm pretty sure we already fought and won. And yesterday, he confused Jeb Bush and George W. Bush and said that Jeb got us involved in the Middle East. And then, of course, there are his authoritarian posts on Truth Social calling for the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to be executed and saying that he's going to investigate media companies that he doesn't like. You know, and can you imagine if Biden said, you know what, I'm going to look into that Fox News. They don't seem to like me over there.
This may be the choice that people have. Yeah. Trump versus Biden. Laid bare here, Jesse.
At least Trump can say LL Cool J, Jessica.
Are you
in a prompter?
ID to buy bread.
Biden has to stay upright and Trump has to stay out of prison. Think about how ridiculous that is. That is the most corrupt and low expectation situation where Joe Biden has to not fall flat on his face to have a shot at re-election. And he promised us he would get us back to normal. But all he's worried about is making himself look normal. He's not worried about inflation. It's not like, oh, if I could just get inflation down and rates down and crime down and illegal immigration down, then I'd have a shot. It's, I just need to stay on my 2 feet, then I can get back into the White House. He's forgotten about us. And his people have forgotten about us, too, because while they should be worrying about health care and access to affordable, they're worried about the commander-in-chief not falling over a sandbag. They're trying to make sure he has the right shoes. They're trying to lower the back of the stairs to get back into Air Force One. Those aren't the things that they should be concerned about. They're working for us. They should be concerned with us. They should not be concerned with the prop of a president being propped up. And Greg hit it. This whole presidency has been choreographed, from the fake set to these little fake press conferences to the lack of access. This guy is a walking stand-in, and he can't even stand. And he's about this close to falling down again. And that's how scared they are.
I would just say today he was standing upright on the picket line with the auto workers, right? And tomorrow, Trump will be showing up at a non-union plant in Michigan. He was not invited by the union to come and speak. Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, I bought bread with an ID the other day.
Standing up is a pretty low bar.
And I had beer, too, that's why.
What about?
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.